Recently, the Indian Navy Chief Admiral R. Kumar in an interview said that the Navy is planning for a third aircraft carrier and that the Navy is in talks with the government regarding the same.
We actually are moving a case for the follow-on of this Vikrant. Primarily, the Navy envisages 3 operational carriers. Over a period of time, in building Vikrant, considerable expertise and skill has been developed in Cochin shipyard. So therefore, we have moved a case for the third aircraft carrier as a repeat order of Vikrants.
India currently operates 2 aircraft carriers, INS Vikramaditya and INS Vikrant. Then what's the need for a third one? And more importantly, do we have the funds for such a big procurement? We'll discuss all this in detail along with the developments on the sea front in our neighborhood. Hello guys, I am Saurav and welcome to the Arc. India has a long coastline of 7,516 kilometers with a very large exclusive economic zone of 2.01 million square kilometers. India's geography with its peninsular orientation and a chain of islands in Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep, overlooking strategic sea lanes of communication in the Indian Ocean, is a natural advantage. The Indian Navy's area of responsibility is the Indian Ocean, starting from the Strait of Hormuz in the west to the Malacca Strait in the east. In the Indian Ocean region, major sea lines of communication pass. This is where 80% of world's seaborne oil trade and 75% of the world's maritime trade happen, and around 100,000 commercial vessels traverse through the Indian Ocean every year. As far as India is concerned, nearly 80% of the country's crude oil requirement is fulfilled using the ISLs across the Indian Ocean. Offshore gas fields also contribute to 80% of India's domestic natural gas production. More than 90% of India's international trade by volume and over 70% by value is carried over the seas. With India's economy growing, diplomatic interests expanding, and the rapidly changing geopolitical situations in and around the Indo-Pacific region, the Indian Navy's responsibilities have grown manifold. There are multiple points in the Indian Ocean region called the choke points. These are narrow passages in the sea. These choke points, if blocked, will disrupt communication entirely. Therefore, it is extremely critical that the Indian Navy keeps a constant vigil on the Indian Ocean region to safeguard India's national interests and maritime security. Before getting into the necessity of an aircraft carrier, let's first understand what an aircraft carrier is. An aircraft carrier, as the name suggests, carries aircraft. And it's essentially a floating airfield with a flight deck for aircraft to take off and land. Land-based aerial assets have limitations to deliver adequate and sustained force over long distances. Because of these limitations, aircraft carriers came into picture. They can quickly move into an area of operation and operate independently for long periods. So, aircraft carrier can take the battle deep into the sea. The carrier with its aircraft, helicopters, drones allows to conduct operations in the seas, which would have been limited if they operated from the shores. The aircraft carrier itself has limited firepower for offense and defense, which is why they always operate in carrier battle groups with escort ships such as destroyers, frigates, corvettes, submarines, ASW aircraft sailing together. An aircraft carrier is a symbol of national power. Developing a blue water navy is centered on aircraft carriers. The primary purpose of aircraft carriers and carrier battle groups is power projection and assertion of dominance in the seas. India currently operates 2 aircraft carriers, INS Vikramaditya and INS Vikrant. But India has a long history of operating aircraft carriers. India purchased the first aircraft carrier from Britain in 1957 and inducted it in 1961 and became the first Asian country to operate an aircraft carrier. It was named INS Vikrant. The 19,500-ton aircraft carrier played a vital role in the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War. After serving for 36 years, it was finally decommissioned in 1997. In 1986, the Indian Navy acquired the British HMS Hermes, which served the British Royal Navy since 1959. It was named INS Vikrant and was commissioned by the Indian Navy in 1987. The 28,700-ton carrier played a crucial role in Operation Jupiter, Operation Parakram, and Operation Vijay, among others. It was decommissioned from service in 2017. As INS Vikrant was nearing its end of life around the year 1997, the Indian Navy was looking for a replacement of the ship. Then what happened is an interesting and tragic story. After INS Vikrant's retirement, the Indian Navy was left with only one carrier, INS Vikrant, which was set to retire in 2007. In 2004, India and Russia struck a deal in which India would receive Admiral Gorshkov aircraft carrier. Admiral Gorshkov was earlier a Soviet-era Kiev-class aircraft carrier built in a shipyard in Ukraine. But after dissolution of the Soviet Union, Ukraine became a separate country. The Admiral Gorshkov carrier, which was inherited by Russia, was then mothballed due to maintenance issues. After India's deal with Russia, work on the carrier started to upgrade it for $974 million. Remember this figure. The upgradation work was to be carried out by Sebma shipyard of Russia that specialized in submarine construction but had no prior experience in building aircraft carriers. By 2007, just a year before delivery, India found out that the work on the ship was only 50% complete, and the shipyard started demanding twice as much money to complete the job. Then in July 2009, Russia's then President Dmitry Medvedev made a visit to the Sebma shipyard and publicly reprimanded the shipyard manager for the delays. Finally, in 2010, renegotiations took place, and India agreed to pay $2.2 billion for the carrier, more than double the budget. Surprisingly, Sebma started working harder and finished the other half of the upgrades in only 3 years. Admiral Gorshkov finally became INS Vikramaditya and was commissioned into the Indian Navy in November 2013. The 44,500-ton warship is about 284 meters long and its height is around 60 meters. It's a stow bar type or short takeoff barrier assisted recovery carrier. It can carry 34 aircraft with a mix of MiG-29K, Kamov Ka-31, ALH Dhruv, Chetak, etc. It currently operates from its home base in Karwar, Karnataka, under the Western Naval Command. However, since its induction, there have been multiple technical issues reported in the carrier, starting from boiler failure, refueling issues, to multiple fire accidents and other technical problems. Finally, the brand new indigenous aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant. Built at a cost of around 23,000 crores, the 45,000-ton ship has been designed by the Indian Navy's Warship Design Bureau and built by the Cochin Shipyard Limited. It has an overall indigenous content of 76%. It can carry about 30 aircraft, comprising of MiG-29K fighters, Kamov Ka-31, MH-60R multi-role helicopters, ALH Dhruv helicopters, etc. It is also a stow-bar type carrier. It was commissioned into the Navy in September 2022. In February this year, a naval LCA landed on the decks of INS Vikrant for the first time, making it historic, with an Indian fighter jet landing on an Indian aircraft carrier for the first time. India and France are currently negotiating a deal for 57 Rafale M fighter jets for the Indian Navy. The Navy plans to operate INS Vikramaditya from the western seaboard and INS Vikrant from the eastern seaboard, one looking east and one looking west. The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Defence recommended 3 aircraft carriers for the Indian Navy. The Navy argues that 3 carriers are necessary to have at least 2 deployed operationally, while the third undergoes maintenance or refit. Because the refit or maintenance of the aircraft carriers takes somewhere between 6 months to 2 years' time. The Indian Navy initially envisaged the IAC-2, a 65,000-ton conventionally propelled Katobar carrier, and was studying the design of Britain's HMS Queen Elizabeth carrier. Then what changed? As the Navy chief said in the interview, the Navy is now looking for a repeat order of IAC-1, that is the INS Vikrant class 45,000 carrier, with design and capability improvements, and will continue studying the IAC-2 size and capabilities for a future carrier. The logic behind this decision is fairly simple. The Cochin Shipyard Limited that built the INS Vikrant has acquired considerable expertise in manufacturing, design and integration skills, which would go idle without a repeat order. Also, the Cochin Shipyard is building a new dry dock with a cost of Rs 1800 crore, with the capability to construct bigger vessels, including bigger aircraft carriers. From an economic standpoint, it has been found that with indigenous development, a significant portion of the project cost was re-injected into the Indian economy. Also, it took around 13 years for the CSL to deliver the carrier to the Navy. But now with the expertise gained, the CSL promises to deliver the same sized carrier in 8 years. Even with that timeline, a new aircraft carrier entering service with the Navy will take around 10 to 12 years, which means by the time this new carrier enters service, INS Vikramaditya will be near its end of lifespan. In all our discussion so far, we have not yet considered the most important reason behind India's need for a third aircraft carrier. And that's our neighbor in the north, China. The 21st century has been described as the century of the seas. Wars will be won and lost in the seas. And for that, you need ships. Lots of it. China has a formidable shipbuilding capacity. And the speed at which they are building ships is mind-boggling. I'll give you an example. China inducted the 50th ship of its new generation, Type 056 class corvette, having a 1500-ton displacement in 2018. But the type began construction only in 2012, which means Chinese shipyards have produced these corvettes at a rate of approximately 1 new ship every 1.5 months. Now, if we compare the Chinese Type 052 DL destroyer Nanning, which was launched in 2019 and inducted in 2021. On the other hand, India's Visakhapatnam class destroyer INS Mormugao of the same 7,500-ton displacement was launched in 2016 and was inducted in 2022. But took us 6 years, they are doing it in 2. China currently has the world's largest navy, overtaking the US, with more than 350 vessels in its fleet. It is projected that the Chinese fleet will grow to 400 ships by 2025 and 440 ships by 2030. PLAN has 2 operational aircraft carriers, Liaoning and Shandong, with stow-bar design. A third carrier, Fujian, will feature a catapult launch and arrested landing, and is expected to be operational by 2024. Take a look at this comparison of world's leading aircraft carrier. China's focus is currently centered around Taiwan and the South China Sea, but a 400-ship navy will always have a few spare ships to deploy elsewhere. And where do you think China will target next? The Indian Ocean region. India is a major regional power and aspires to be a security provider in the region. The IOR being India's backyard, India must step in to take the larger role, providing security in the IOR, to protect its own interest and also challenge the adversary. And for that, India needs to keep pace with China in terms of naval capabilities. As India and China are locked in a conflict in the northern borders, India will have to use its naval force in the event of an all-out war, exploiting China's vulnerabilities in the seas. Also, India being a member of the Quad, with US, Japan and Australia, India's enhanced naval capabilities will elevate India's standing in the grouping. And if Quad ultimately becomes a military alliance, its members will look to New Delhi to play a significant military role, especially in the Indian Ocean. So at this point, a repeat order of 3rd aircraft carrier of INS Vikrant size with enhanced capabilities makes perfect sense. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon with a new video. Thank you.